Hello, I'm Dan Thompson. I'm at 62 Yonge Street in Brighton, and this is another segment of the Brighton I Remember for the Brighton Digital Archives. Very pleased to take part in this. I was born in Brighton, well, actually Trenton Memorial Hospital in 1951, and my dad was a lawyer in Brighton, and he practiced with his father, Clive. My dad was Ben Thompson. His father was Clive, and my dad was married to Patricia Nesbitt, and there were 5 of us. I had 4 sisters. I was the second oldest in the family, and we first lived on Main Street across from the funeral home, and then when I was 9, we moved to 36 Yonge Street, which is just a few doors down. I figured I've lived on Yonge Street for almost 50 years and managed to move just about 6 doors up the street. In any event, the home that we moved to on Yonge Street was formerly owned by William and Blanche Bibby, and they were relatives on my mother's side. So my mother's grandmother was Eleanor Bibby, and it turns out that Eleanor Bibby grew up in this house, 62 Yonge Street. Her parents were Edwin and Jane Bibby, who were folks that were born in Wales, came to Canada West as it then was. They were married in Oshawa in 1865. And they moved to Brighton in 1875. And my great-great-grandfather, Edwin Bibby, was a merchant, had a big store downtown. And they owned this house, 62 Yonge Street, until 1916. Jane, her middle name was Morris, her maiden name, Jane Morris Bibby, died in 1905. And there's, in St. Paul's Church in Brighton, St. Paul's Anglican Church, the stained glass windows over the sanctuary are dedicated in memory of Jane Morris Bibby. And the one that, when you read it, you have to read across, so there's 3 panels, 3 windows. It's a depiction of the Sermon on the Mount. And it says, "To the glory of God, in loving memory of Jane Morris Bibby, a native of North Wales, and then born and then died." But if you just read the one window, on the left-hand side, it says, "To the glory of God, a native of North Wales." And all the Welsh people really like that idea, that God was a native of North Wales. So the Bibbies, as I say, raised these children. Eleanor Bibby married Sam Nesbitt. Sam Nesbitt became a very prominent citizen in Brighton. He owned the White House, which is on Main Street, just up past the YMCA Health Services Center building, and that was his family home. He was also a merchant. Then he got into the canning business, so he founded the Nesbitt Canning Company, which then my grandfather, Ed Nesbitt, took over and ran. And then his son, my Uncle Bob Nesbitt, also was part of the Nesbitt Canning Company until operations ceased in the early 60s. So the Nesbitt family, as I say, were very prominent. Sam Nesbitt served as the Reeve of Brighton several terms. He was also a member of the Legislative Assembly, or member of Provincial Parliament, as we now call them, for the Northumberland riding. And he was very active in an association of canning companies called Dominion Canners. And he passed away in mid-30s, and at that time he actually owned the office building on Main Street, 67 Main Street, which my grandfather Thompson had been practicing in the office there for about 5-6 years. He came in 1931 to Brighton, and thanks to Digital Archives, actually I came to my knowledge that great-grandfather Sam Nesbitt at one point had an office of the canning company in that building. So one of the sons of Edwin and Jane Bibby, Will, his name was Uncle Will, he and his wife owned 36 Yonge Street. And Uncle Will passed away. I didn't really know him, but I knew Blanche, Annie Blanche we called her. And actually, Annie Blanche was killed in a motor vehicle accident, car accident in Trenton in 1959 or 60, along with my grade 3 teacher, Rose Strong. Actually, they both died in this car accident. So my parents were able to purchase the home at 36 Yonge Street from the Blanche Bibby estate. So that's where we lived until my parents sold that home in 1976. And I guess sort of my story is that I went to university. After graduating from ENSS, I went to Trent University, got a degree in history and politics, and then I went to law school at Queen's University in Kingston. And I came back to the area to practice law, moved to Brighton, actually Presqu'île, in 1978. And then in 1984, my wife and I, we had 3 boys at the time, bought this home, which had been substantially repaired and renovated so that when we bought it, there was an owner in between, but when we bought it, there was a lot of the heavy, expensive stuff had been done. I guess that's kind of the connection of the Nesbitts and the Bibbies. The Nesbitts were Presbyterians, the Bibbies were Anglicans, and the former Presbyterian church on Main Street in Brighton, which is located where the Whole Health new building is presently. There was a stained glass window in that church that was dedicated in the memory of James and Agnes Nesbitt. And it was a bit unusual for a Presbyterian church because mostly they didn't have fancy stained glass windows. Went against their Scottish philosophy, I guess. But this was a really nice window that when Mark Wallace, our former mayor of Brighton, bought the property to develop into a couple of townhouses, he asked me if the family would like to acquire the window. So we did a little fundraiser with the Nesbitt relatives and raised the money to have the window taken out of the church, refurbished, installed in an oak case, and it is now in St. Paul's Church on Sanford Street. So I guess the history of the Bibbies and the Nesbitts goes back a long way in Brighton, and I guess always contributed to my sense of having, I guess, really belonging here. And I've come to realize for a lot of folks that's not the way they grow up, but I've always been very grateful for that.